Good morning, everybody. If I can open the meeting, please. The first item on the agenda is appointment of chairman. Can I have a nomination, please? Councillor Will.
May I nominate Councillor Bernard Peters, please?
Is that seconded? Thank you. Are you happy to take the chair?
I am, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for allowing me to carry on as chair of this panel. What I'd like to do is an informal start by just going round the room and asking people to introduce themselves so that we have an appreciation of who's here. And then once we get into the meeting, if you could just make sure that you remind people of who you are, really, because it's new people, new faces. So would we like to start over there, please?
Hello there. Yes, I'm Councillor David Williams. I'm a Cabinet Member for Communities, Education and Safety at Stoke City Council.
Hello, I'm Angela Loughlin and I'm from Stafford Borough Council.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill Heasom. I'm from Newcastle Borough Council.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Jo Elson, Cabinet Member for Community and Wellbeing. Chase.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Dan Mycott from Tamworth Borough Council.
Good morning. I'm Chris Newell, Chief Constable of Staffordshire Police.
Good morning. I'm Keith Walker, an independent member of the panel.
Morning, I'm Adrian Bowen, also an independent member.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Atkins, on this occasion representing Staffordshire Moorlands, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Services.
The Section 151 officer for the Commissioner.
Ben Adams, I'm the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner.
Good morning, I'm Victoria Farrett and the Head of Governance for the Commissioner's Office.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody. I'm Helen Fisher. I'm Deputy Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner.
Richard Cox, representing Lichfield District Council as Cabinet Member for Community Engagement.
Thank you. And I'm Bernard Peters from East Staffordshire and chair of the panel today. Item 2 on the agenda is the appointment of a vice chairman. And I'd like to nominate Councillor Cox. Seconded? Seconded. Thank you. Any other nominations? Councillor Cox, vice chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Item 3 on the agenda. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Fitzpatrick from East Staffs and Councillor Lees from South Staffs.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda. Declarations of interest. Sorry, Commissioner.
Excuse me, Chairman. Yeah, apologies from Louise Clayton, my Chief Executive.
Thank you. Noted. Item 4, declarations of interest. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, just in terms of the annual report, it talks about the space scheme, and my employer has provided services to the space scheme in the past. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Item 5 on the agenda, minutes of the meetings. There are 3 sets of minutes there. I wasn't at those meetings, so I'll move that we approve them. Councillor Cox, would you help to say anything? Because I think you chaired those meetings.
Well, I'm happy to move them, Chairman, as long as the members present agree to them. But they look in order to me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we, sorry?
Just to second that, Chair.
Thank you. So can we approve those minutes, please, for those that were in attendance? Yes, thank you. Minutes are approved. Item 6 on the agenda, decisions published by the Commissioner. There are 4 items there. Are there any comments or questions to the Commissioner? No, don't see any at all, so we'll note those items. Thank you. Item 7, questions to the Commissioner from members of the public. We have a link on the agenda. Is there anything to say?
Mr Bradbury has asked 2 questions. The information has been responded to by the Commissioner. Mr Bradbury doesn't have a supplementary question at the moment.
Okay. We note that then. Thank you very much, Mandy. Item 8, consideration of the Commissioner's annual report. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm really pleased. Two years into my term...
Commissioner, may I just interrupt a moment? Is that okay? Apologies, Commissioner. Please carry on.
Thank you. 2 years into my term, as members will be aware, it's a reduced term of 3 years because of the delays as a result of the pandemic. And I'm delighted really to demonstrate some considerable progress, particularly in meeting the commitments, the promises I made to the public about having services that reflected their local priorities. So you'll see in the comprehensive report, hopefully a clear indication, first of all, that we are responding to the public's calls for assistance in a more effective way. That is not only meaning a quicker response to 999 calls and a much improved response on 101, particularly through the use of a triage option, but this has really been delivered not only in terms of timeliness, but better quality of call response as well, which is an extremely important element at the moment because we are having increased numbers of calls. There have been record numbers of calls in just recent weeks into 999, but also increasingly more complicated calls. And it's very important that the team are able to identify risk during those conversations with victims and people alerting us to incidents, and that in turn informs the nature and speed of the response from response teams or indeed from fire and rescue. So very pleased to see progress on that number 1 priority of mine, to improve contact and then in turn to improve the nature and quality of the response. Some of the members will be aware that the Chief Constable put into place a new local response model at the end of last July. That means that we have 10 local policing teams, not 11 as in your draft of the forward. Apologies, we've got a little tweak to make there. And that means each local chief inspector has their own response teams. The neighbourhood teams are more able to dedicate themselves to the task of neighbourhood community policing. And that means the nature of the response, certainly the local knowledge, the distance that some response officers have to travel is reduced. That in turn leads to more effective investigations when they are at a site and more time to spend with victims. So that's a clear step forward in local responsive policing. You'll also see in the plan that we've made progress with our other priorities, keeping crime low, particularly keeping antisocial behaviour low. Antisocial behaviour is reducing, continues to reduce across Staffordshire, but we're not letting up. Particularly antisocial behaviour in public places is an issue for residents and businesses, and very timely this week, it's Antisocial Behaviour Week, and you'll hear about a number of ways that we're going forward, not just as an office, not just as a police service, but particularly with our community safety partners. They are councils and probation and housing associations. And you'll see in the report that I've reiterated my commitment to local partnership. I continue to fund the community safety partnerships with core finance, but also to provide ASB grant money and money for a community change fund. This is where perhaps individual residents or community groups wish to tackle an issue in their area, and we'll support them to do that. And that's a 3-year commitment, which allows for better, I think, long-term commissioning of local services, and also certainty and the potential to join up with neighbours in commissioning activities, particularly around good positive behaviours for young people. In that vein, a further 2 years committed to the space programme. That's the diversionary activities for young people during the summer holidays. You'll start to see some of that working through and being communicated in the next few weeks. And I met our new space champion, a young lady called Amy, who is incredibly started in space at a boxing club 5 years ago in Stafford. Turned up on us first day of her summer holidays and barely went home for the next 6 weeks. She's now the national youth champion for boxing. And if you get a chance to see her video or meet her, you will be inspired, as I was the other day. Absolutely wonderful. My other priority, Chairman, road safety. Now, this is not just speeding. It's vehicles without insurance. It's heavy goods vehicles that are overloaded. It's vehicles that have not got MOTs or are safe to be on the roads. And I'm very pleased in 2 years we've seen a continued commitment to roads policing. They are taking criminals off the road. They are finding, not least in partnership with my deputy, who happened to be on a mission where they found a load of cash in the boot of a vehicle, hundreds of thousands of pounds. But we are also increasing our community speed watch teams and investing in new camera safety vans, new digital cameras in fixed locations, and very importantly, because this again was a promise of mine 2 years ago, more automatic number plate recognition cameras across key roads, key junctions, particularly our borders. Some of the uplift in crime since COVID, particularly in Staffordshire and the West Midlands, has been related to vehicle crime. And that is often, unfortunately, perpetrated by criminals crossing from neighbouring areas. The good news is, in partnership with those neighbouring areas, we've been tackling that. And you heard about an operation earlier in the year which has led to over 80 arrests and stemmed that unwelcome tide. And a big thank you to my deputy, Helen, because she has absolutely championed our commitment to road safety and been here, there and everywhere making the case, not least our shared worry about the people who lose their lives or are injured on the roads, and there have been too many of them again as the roads have got busier. I think my main role, this perhaps isn't quite accurate. I think there's 2 things I needed to get right. The first was to get 2 good chief officers leading our police and fire service. And I'm delighted, and I do thank Chris Noble, who's here today, Chief Constable, and Rob Barber, our Chief Fire Officer, not only for their own personal leadership that they've shown everyone in the team, but their absolute determination to get Staffordshire back to the top. I think I made some good choices. I know I made some good choices. And that gives me confidence because they are both exceptionally professional people who have the respect of their organisations. But they don't run these organisations on their own. So I want to thank every officer, every firefighter, every member of staff, and every volunteer in both services. it has not been an easy couple of years. Coming out of COVID in particular, we've had national incidents, we had the tragic loss of the Queen, we've had the biggest police operation anywhere in the history of the UK in the coronation. This has meant police officers haven't had holidays, they haven't been with their families, and the commitment during the period, quite often without it being reflected in pay increases, which I'm very hopeful will be just around the corner. I think we've missed that, you know. They weren't getting support through the pandemic. They were at the sharp end. And quite often that meant they were exposed to potential illness and great sacrifice. The other key priority for me is making sure that the two organisations are resourced. And there's a big section, I think a comprehensive section at the back, not only on the finance that the organisations receive, and you'll know, Chairman, that we cover that in great depth here in the panel at the appropriate time of the year. But just to say that the numbers that were forecast to us when we set the budgets were hit almost to the penny, which is a great credit to David, first of all, because he oversees that from my perspective, but also delivers on the fire and rescue finance, and also to John Bloomer and his team. I'm absolutely delighted that forecasts are real, and that doesn't mean any quick stepping in April, May to balance the budget. It also meant I could make a decision in an informed way about council tax, and it wasn't an easy one. I'm very conscious that this year in particular, household budgets were a real challenge for people, and I was asking them for some more money. Now, as it happens, I asked them for less money than anywhere else in the country. But because Staffordshire is growing, because there are more houses, and because the employment situation in the county is actually quite good, we did see an increase of £7.4 million on top of previous budgets that's been invested, or is due to be invested, in our police and fire and rescue services. And that is a significant commitment. And you'll see through the document how we're spending that on the absolute number one commitment I made to the public of 250 more police officers in Staffordshire during my term. We will hit that by May next year. And on top of the uplift from government, that means there's 332 officers since the the national commitment for 20,000 more. But it also means all our police stations are open, and in fact we're opening more shared locations. Our fire stations remain open. We have no reduction in firefighters, and in fact we're going further with recruitment of more contact staff, and particularly using the council tax increase to fund extra staff and officers into what the service call the Public Protection Unit. Now, this deals with children, particularly vulnerable adults, safeguarding issues. Unfortunately, it's an area of increasing demand, but no area is more important than looking after people that absolutely need the help of our services. Much of this document, because it is required to be, will detail the extensive work that my team do. Now, as Commissioner, or as a Commissioner's office, we are very much more than the old police and fire authorities were. We have an obligation, statutory, and it's funded, to look after victims and put their interests absolutely at the heart of what we do, but also what the services do. And you'll see that we've increased almost £500,000 more additional funding for domestic abuse support, which is essential. But we're into reducing reoffending. We're looking after victims of antisocial behaviour. We are providing support through volunteers, and we are tirelessly working to bring money and funding into the services here in Staffordshire. £3 million of funding won in the last 2 years on safer streets and programmes for women and girls. And in the last year, we've secured a pilot of £1 million for more antisocial behaviour uniformed patrolling, which will launch and start this week. So I think in the past people have asked the question, are the offices of police, fire and crime commissioners valued for money? And I would hope that only on a brief read through this document, they will see that they are. Not only are we helping to support victims, but we're helping to prevent crime, particularly to prevent repeat crime. And where it is the right thing to do, we're intervening to give offenders, and particularly young people, opportunities to stay away from criminality. And then finally in the document, I talk about the partnership working that we're doing and I'm very involved with. And for me, this is about really adding value where I can to support the two services. So whether it's talking to criminal justice partners, Crown prosecution, probation, courts, prisons, or whether it's working in forums with the NHS, for me, it is absolutely about everybody working together on issues of shared concern. We've got big step forwards around drug and alcohol treatment and tackling offenders and education in that area. I'm very, very pleased to be leading that partnership. It's a significant extra investment. And of course, drugs and alcohol underpin a lot of the pressures, not just on police, but on fire. Far too many fires are related to incidents involving people with issues with substance misuse. And we are getting somewhere with criminal justice, despite the absolutely difficult backlogs as a result of COVID, which means that people who really should see justice more quickly, unfortunately, are sometimes waiting 2 or 3 years to see outcomes or have their opportunity to go to court. And unfortunately, that means people who are victims or witnesses will move on. It's understandable. They want to move on with their lives, but we need to do everything we can to speed up those processes. So I hope that gives you a bit of a feel for the document as a whole. I know not everybody watching is going to read this. It is certainly a document I will direct people to. When they ask questions, what do you do? What does your team do? Why is it important? Is it value? Where's my council tax going? How are we preventing crime? We're supposed to be preventing crime, reducing the number of victims, as well as tackling crime, tackling fires, and going after the fact. And you'll see that a lot of our work is about getting in early, preventing the worst happening, and if it does happen, helping people to recover as soon as possible. Chairman, I'm really happy to take questions, however you want to do it, and we'll work through the document, no doubt.
Thank you, Commissioner. Very comprehensive. I can assure you that panel members have read the report, and we've spent some time this morning working through it. And colleagues will have questions for you in a moment. But I was just, before we open the debate, you talked about 250 increase in police numbers. And I know that in certain parts of Staffordshire, we have very diverse communities. And I'm hoping that we will see ethnic minorities and a different shape to the police force. A few more faces that represent the community that they're representing. That is something that's of concern to a lot of people. We're very encouraged to hear about the community and commissioning services across the patch. People feeling engaged, people becoming aware that the Commissioner has a presence. So that's good to hear. Road safety is also very assuring to people, and thank you to your deputy for the work that she's doing. And I've spoken to many Speedwatch teams who are grateful for the support and appreciate the opportunities when she's able to turn up and hold the camera, as they say. The point, which may be sensitive, but we'd like to talk about that during the conversation, is the appointment of 2 senior officers, and link that to the perceived behaviours within both organisations. I try to say to people, okay, you're not measuring this against what's going on, let's say, for example, in the Met, or what's reported in the Met. We're talking about Staffordshire. And people want to understand that, because life's all about perception when the public feel at risk. Neighbourhood policing, that's doing really well, I think. Visibility is improved. We don't necessarily see policemen on the beat anymore, but we see them in cars driving all around the district, so that provides a level of reassurance. But what I'd like to just explore with you is the feedback to victims about how cases are progressing. They don't want to feel abandoned having reported it, because it takes a lot of courage to dial that number and report it to a police officer or the police station. Does the police turn up at the property, have a conversation? We don't know. But what is the feedback mechanism, and how frequent is it? You made a reference to antisocial behaviour across the patch. Depends where you live, I'd suggest to you. We don't want a generic Staffordshire saying it's okay. But colleagues will explore that with you when we get into the Q&A. So at that point, I'll open it up to colleagues if there are questions. Gillian? I missed that. Sorry, Charlotte.
Ooh. Good morning. It's Councillor Jill Heesom from Newcastle Borough Council, Cabinet Holder for Community Safety and Wellbeing. My question, and I'll apologise if I've asked it in the wrong place. I will have to keep my mouth by this microphone. But I think it probably is, because it goes over a few of the priorities. Demand on the police is growing and growing. Obviously, incidents are going up, and that's not just in Newcastle, that's across the whole county. What is being done to manage this? And I suppose it's a two-part question, because I'm wondering, we're hearing a lot about this right care, right person approach at the moment, and I'm wondering if that's going to be a consideration within the management of these incidents.
Thank you, Jill. Chairman, you mentioned issues being different in different locations, and I couldn't agree more, and that's partly why that operating model is there, to respond. And Councillor Neeson would have seen in Newcastle under Lyme in particular, excellent new Chief Inspector who's really got a grip of issues in the town centre, issues in one or two parts of the wider borough. And in a way, that's where you start with managing demand. If you deal with repeat issues that are of concern to residents and businesses, and problem solve them, actually get to the root of that, know where the hotspots are, and know particularly who might be repeat offenders, then you start to create capacity to do the wider neighbourhood policing and get into the other stuff, which is probably less visible, but nevertheless needs real attention, and he's doing a fine job up in Newcastle. The other way is to tackle the problem head on, and that's why we've increased the number of contact centre staff, and I just agreed that the Commissioner could use £1.7 million this year for a further 25 members of contact staff across this year and next year. Those levels of demand might increase, they might not. And it's now a case of let's see how that goes. But meanwhile, investment in technology, investment in improved process, investment in the right people, and investment particularly in triage, which means that in contact people get an answer very quickly. About half of the calls coming in through triage are dealt with there and then, within a few minutes. They often don't need to go to a specialist call handler. They're not going to lead to a instant response, but perhaps an appointment or some sort of follow-up. So there are those ways of managing demand, and that's really been a focus for the Chief and his team in the last 12 to 15 months. But you mentioned right care, right person, and this is a very significant step forward. For those that don't know, it is essentially an agreement between the Home Office and the Department of Health that people who are vulnerable, people who have perhaps mental health concerns, need to be getting the best care and the right care as soon as possible. And whilst the police service will always respond, as it always has, they are not always the best people to provide that care. They are not professional mental health specialists with nursing and doctor type experience. And yet they quite often carry them in vehicles to safe places. They quite often support people sat in A&E. And that means that they are not on our high streets, they are not investigating burglaries, they are not dealing with organised criminals. These people occasionally are in circumstances where they'll pose a risk to themselves or others, in which case the police will continue to respond. No question. And it was very unfortunate the other day, I think, because the new chief in the Met, I do wish they weren't called commissioners at the Met. He's the Met's chief constable, is my view. The commissioner's the mayor. I won't say any more. But his comments about right care, right person, I think alarmed one or two people, giving the impression that the police were going to step away from situations where harm might be involved. That is not the case. And in the case of our own Chief Constable, Chris was involved at Humberside in introducing this programme there, has been through all of the detail with health partners, and it is now successfully helping to manage not only demand on the police, but meaning that people that need that specialist support get it quicker, in the right places, whether it's 9 o'clock at night or on a Sunday morning. The facilities are there, the support is there, and the ambulances are ready to take them there. It doesn't happen overnight. It will take some months for us, and there's a process of consultation now to get to where we need to be. Because the independent commissioning panel, who now fund the local NHS, will be needing to make changes here. The ambulance service will need to make changes. But this is a commitment at the top of government, and a very welcome one, that it's the way forward for both services. It's certainly the way forward for those vulnerable individuals. So you will hear more about that over the next 6 months in particular, but I'm very comfortable that with the experience we've got at the top and the willingness and the good communication with our health partners, that it will really be a benefit to everybody.
Thank you. Supplementary? Okay.
Yeah, it's just a quick follow-on question, really. Can we be reassured as councillors that we'll be involved in that process or any consultations?
I think you should and would want to be involved. It's not. I don't believe it's a significant role for local councils in quite the same way as some of the work we're doing around reducing antisocial behaviour and working on crime prevention together, because it's very much about the specialists with the resources in the NHS. But clearly that affects every locality, and I think we've all got a role to share the plan and to help people understand what is happening, because it's a positive thing, and if not reported correctly, it will alarm some individuals unnecessarily, and that's not what it's about at all. So yes, absolutely wider conversation. I'm sure councils will be involved.
Thank you. Thank you. Charlotte Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 3 questions, so I appreciate that your answers will be shorter than previously, because clearly I don't want to take up everyone's time. First of all, in your foreword to your annual report, you talk about the unacceptable behaviour of some individuals in other parts of the country has discredited the services and undermined national confidence. But isn't the case that we have our own behaviours that have not met the sort of behaviours we'd expect in, say, for the fire service. We've talked about bullying in the inspection report, about managers not taking action when inappropriate comments were made. So what I'm concerned about is that you're downplaying the behaviours that we have to address in our own services by looking at what's been happening nationwide, which of course is unacceptable. And of course what's happened in the Met and other areas is totally unacceptable. But isn't it the case that we have to focus on what's happening in our own service and to make sure that we're not making the same mistakes as the Met, to nip those behaviours in the bud? So the second question I want to ask about is, I appreciate that we are a low crime area, but if you're affected by antisocial behaviour, it's 100% an issue for you. Now, there clearly is some more resources for antisocial behaviour. So I would like to know, first of all, how you're going to be prioritising antisocial behaviour hotspots for that extra funding. And one of the key issues around antisocial behaviour is CCTV. Now, I have asked this before, not within this panel, but elsewhere, about whether you are having full access for observing antisocial behaviour on local authority CCTV cameras, and whether there's any problem at all in terms of downloading those images for evidential purposes. Because if you could clear that up, that would be really helpful, because it has been an issue, particularly in Leek, but also elsewhere, where that access to those images, which are good images, but there seems to have been some glitch whereby the police cannot fully use those images. And thirdly, I want to ask about tech consistency, because in the inspection report on the fire service, it talks about the fact that mobile data terminals could not be taken off fire engines, and that fire officers didn't have smartphones, that they had to print off inspection. They had to print off information about an incident before they got there, rather than actually accessing it via a smartphone. You talk in your report about investment in technology for the police so they can work out in the community, but the tech for the fire service is absolutely vital, because we are talking here about the safety of fire officers. And while we're talking about fire safety, in your section on fire service for tomorrow, you talk about adapting flexible crew policies, including operating with a minimum crew of 4. I would like your reassurance that the rumour going round that you're thinking about having crews of 3 is not correct, because certainly I've been picking that up, that there has been some suggestion that there would be a crew of 3, which certainly would not meet with national guidelines on safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thanks, Councillor Atkins. There's some informed questions there, most definitely. I might just revisit that language in the forward. There has clearly been very high-profile, unacceptable behaviour beyond, way what is happening in most of the country. And I'm talking about the absolutely outrageous situation with Wayne Couzens and others, leading to multiple sentences. But also very concerning reports from London Fire Brigade and issues in a couple of Welsh services as well. I absolutely don't downplay the importance of this. In fact, the reason that the Chief Fire Officer and I encouraged HMI to come in sooner with their inspection of us last year was that a number of members of staff, I say a number, a handful, had expressed concerns about the way some of their concerns were being dealt with. And in my opinion, we had too many cases that were either going to tribunal or needed a independent resolution. I'm very pleased to say in the last 12 months that that number has essentially been worked through. In one or two cases, I think we've made appropriate compensation or come to agreements with the individuals. But what you've seen across both services is a step up, actually, in the standards that they feel are acceptable. They make clear early on. And it's about managers, as much as possible, trying to identify and assist staff with concerns sooner and feeling equipped and empowered to do so, rather than issues gravitating. But I would like to assure people, they are not the sort of things they've been reading about in the papers. However, there has been reason for people to be dismissed. There have been reasons for people to be, there's been misconduct. And there are more people coming forward as a result of the activities of both services to reassure and help people to bring forward their concerns. I think it's all positive, particularly around issues related to sexism. Now, this is really important because, as the chairman said, we need both services to really best reflect the community. Over half of our new police officers in the last 2 years have been female, and a good additional proportion, particularly of quite high-level staff in the fire service, are female. They absolutely have to feel entirely comfortable and entirely supported in their organisations, and they will be so. I've got no tolerance or patience with it, and neither do the two chiefs. But it is all managed professionally and carefully. So I might just revisit that because I don't want anybody to think that we don't take this seriously. In terms of ASB, there's an awful lot we're doing. And first of all, this is the area where I'm hoping you and I will chat more, as I will with other members of the panel and your community safety leads. And I was in Leek last week speaking to your new leader and deputy about this. You all have community safety partnerships. I support them. I would say there is a mix as to how effective some of us are in partnership in different locations. And I think we need to be using the information that my office provides through the strategic needs assessments, which we fund for you, to really understand where the problems are. And we need to be directing whatever resources we've got at working together in those areas. Now, in some areas, it's going to mean more involvement from housing. In some areas, it's going to mean more from the police, and in some, it's going to mean more from the councils. But we've all got to get together and do it. And that's why the last 12 months, the focus for me on my community safety forum has been ASB. We've sat down with all the local partners. We've looked at the powers that you have available to you, things like community protection notices, things like public space protection orders. We've looked at how they might be enforced and managed, better understanding, and there's more opportunity to do more with that. We've put quite a bit into CCTV through Safer Streets and other external funding. I was pleased to hear that after 2.5 years, CCTV, the new digital system in Leek, is now working. It wasn't. And it wasn't working, and that was an issue for the police. However, on CCTV, because this came up when I was in the Moorlands Parish Assembly a few weeks ago, I'm conscious there's some issues in Cheadle at the moment. And what we're finding is that there are so many different systems for CCTV in particular, all valuable as it happens. The Ring doorbells and things like that are incredibly valuable now for tackling burglary and vehicle crime and things of that nature. But we also have people with the right intentions in mind, with helmet cameras on their cyclists, sending in information about near misses on roads, things of that nature, people with dash cams. And it is an ever-growing challenge for the police, in particular, to manage the amount and range and variety of information coming in. Some's digital off the cloud, some needs discs, some needs a visit, some needs a download. It is exceptionally complicated. So I'm thinking this year, perhaps the project for all of us as community safety partners is to come together and just try to understand what we each have, where it isn't necessarily as accessible to the police as it might be, and how we can work together to optimise that. Understanding that you're not going to chuck technology out from 3 years ago. If it's still working well, there might need to be some input. But I think that's a good project for us to work together on over the next 12 months. The first piece of work we did, by the way, was around illegal trespass, so unlawful encampments. And that was an issue for some communities in particular, where we had people turning up on private land and concerning communities. So it's really worked well, those sessions where we come together. Your fire challenge is interesting. I'm just struggling to lay my hands in the fire section. There is a reference to the technology that we've been putting in and continue to put in.
Page 44.
You got to it ahead of me. Yeah, so we've got new resource planning software in command and control. That's a key part of it. Now, making that, it's amazing just how much information about particular locations is stored in a variety of different ways. In fact, some of the information around particularly sensitive buildings is on the location or not necessarily held in a digital form. So it will be some time before firefighters are not necessarily having to have pieces of paper or documents or other material to support them in going to a case. But clearly, the sooner we can get that to be digital and more so, the better. But significantly there, we're also looking, and this is very much at the prompting of the Fire Brigades Union and the chief officers, looking at what they call a clean cab concept. This is quite concerning, actually. There's a suggestion that because of the material that you might bring back into the cab after tackling a fire, some of it could lead to long-term health issues. Almost a case that the firefighters might need to clean themselves off, put their kit into a different place rather than just getting straight back in the cab, because they need that material to be elsewhere. So there's a programme now, quite a significant one, around that as well. So whether it's software at the contact centre in Birmingham, which we share with the West Midlands Fire Service, local stuff, local communications equipment, there is a continued investment in that area, and it's absolutely essential. And just on the riding in 4s and 3s, Staffordshire this year, the main issue for His Majesty's inspectors was the productivity of the service. And this is not just, it's getting to those incidents as quickly as possible. It's getting a number of teams to the incidents as quickly as possible, because very rarely is it one appliance, one team at an incident, however small. But also making sure we've got the money to keep all our firefighters. And we were running a very high overtime bill in bringing people in where somebody was ill or off duties to make up a team of 5 on our whole-time firefighter response. And we were one of just 3 or 4 forces in the whole country that were still doing that, rather than the team going out in 4. So we did a very extensive pilot and consultation around that. There was some resistance and some concern, and it's something I'm still monitoring. I'm very, very interested to see where we might have more regular running in 4s than in other parts of the county. But very pleased to report that in the main it is entirely safe, and it has led to rapid response of the right kind. Now, the threes is a pilot that we're looking at particularly in South Staffordshire, where we're very dependent on on-call firefighters. So these are the firefighters that, whether they're at a Christmas party or a birthday or whatever, 60 hours a week, they will just drop everything and run to the station and try to make up a team. Quite often not the first team on site, because in South Staffs, a lot of that first response is by the West Mids whole-time firefighters. But in parts of the county, very, very much part of the team that tackle the incident. If we can get more on-call firefighters there as teams in threes than not there at all, that is what we're exploring. Because at the moment, if they're not in a four, they don't go. And quite often, being there in a three is a very effective support for the other teams that are there. But we are piloting this, and there are two reasons. Firstly, more teams at the incident, but secondly, we need more on-call firefighters. The nature of the county is we must have a rural and urban mix, a mix of on-call and whole time. And at the moment, it's getting more and more difficult to attract people, particularly if they're not getting what they call on the run, they're not responding to incidents and getting the feedback that they need from all their training and commitment and so on. So by being out in threes, it builds up their experience, builds up their local knowledge and confidence, and they can be out on more jobs. It probably means they're going to stick around as an on-call firefighter for longer, and they will be more professional as a result. So there is a recruitment and retention element to this pilot too. But I'm very happy to come back, Chairman, later in the year when we know how that's worked out in South Staffs. It will not roll out wider unless it works, and it works for everybody. And safety is absolutely number one. It must and will be safe.
If I could just come back on that, because clearly, nationally, 4 is seen as being the safe minimum standard. And whether they're on-call firefighters or not, safety of firefighters is absolutely crucial number one issue. And I'm very alarmed that I appreciate what you're saying. They may not be the first team there, but in certain circumstances, they could well be, particularly given climate change and the fact that we are dealing with many more spontaneous fires. So I'm really concerned about that. You're saying it's a pilot. When is that pilot coming to conclusion, and when will it come to this panel? Because I know that lots of people are very concerned about that. I'm delighted that you are taking inappropriate behaviour seriously within the services. And I have to say that what's absolutely crucial is that whistleblowers, whether they be the victim of inappropriate behaviour or whether they just be someone who has observed it, absolutely vital those whistleblowers are protected and not demonised by the service. So I think it's absolutely crucial. But I am very concerned about going down the route of 3 firefighters. I appreciate that we have a large number of vacancies. I appreciate efficiency requires improvement, but that is no reason at all to put firefighters' health and safety at risk. Just lastly, I don't think you quite answered the issue around the kit that firefighters have in terms of smartphones and mobile data, because it's absolutely crucial that given that we have low staffing levels and we need to increase our efficiency, that we use tech in a way that ensures that firefighters are as best prepared they can be before they get to an incident.
Councillor Atkins, couldn't agree more. Chairman, with your permission, do you mind if I just ask David to come in on the tech stuff? I think he's a bit closer to that
more than happy.
than me in terms of the detail.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Just to confirm, really, that in terms of the smartphones, you talked about smartphones, so they have been rolled out now to all frontline appliances. So in terms of the areas for improvement that were raised by HMI, there were 20 areas for improvement. We've been working through them as a service. So and many of those have now been resolved and ticked off. So that's one of the key areas that we've been working through as part of that work. So we have done that, so just to confirm that.
That's encouraging. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Councillor Maycock. Sorry, Councillor Williams, sorry.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by echoing the concerns about possibly going down a route of only having 3 firefighters on the team. So I just want to put on record I'm concerned about what safety that puts the firefighters at as well. But moving on, if I may, Commissioner, to another question, and I'm going to take a slightly different tack. Firstly, to start, I'll say I found the report very informative and useful to read, so thank you. I've looked at it in detail. I think my question concerns how that report is presented as a public-facing document. Clearly, what residents want to know if they pick up that report is what does good look like? What does good performance look like? And within the annual report, it talks about what you said and what progress has been made. However, I've got some concerns because I think the lack of setting baseline data and the use of percentages inside the report can make it difficult, maybe for residents to understand how performance is going. If I give one example, it talks about calls being answered, 999 calls, 101 calls, and it talks about it's been reduced by X percent. What it doesn't do, though, it doesn't tell residents what the wait time is. It doesn't say what the baseline was, say, at the start of the previous year. We may have had a really bad year last year, so if you have a small percentage decrease, it's hard to know if that's good. So I go back to the point about what good looks like. And it also talks about, the number of residents who may access a service. But I think without having, target numbers in there, without it being presented in a certain way, it's quite difficult for residents to understand, how to assess performance, because it's quite a verbal report and the numbers that are given don't go against a target or a baseline. So that's my question. I just wondered if that could be considered in terms of how public-facing reports are presented moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Williams. I'm very conscious, as you are, that actually this is quite a complicated world. And we had a little bit of welcome feedback from the panel last year about this report, which they felt was too... there's quite a lot of talking and perhaps not a little more action, please, was the sort of summary I took away. And we've tried to do that with the breakdown of exactly what we're doing and providing more statistical information. For me, to know that 85% of 999 calls in April were answered within 10 seconds gets right to that. So you don't wait 10 seconds for 999. And that made us 12th out of 43 forces. There's that sort of stat. Most people get it. You're quite right. We don't necessarily know if 15 minutes response time is good or bad. It's actually our target for grade 1 response. So if we're getting calls, people turning up perhaps to serious incidents, burglaries, things of that nature, within 15 minutes, it's a good response. What I would say is that this isn't really where I do performance. This is where I'm reporting on the activities of my office and how I'm doing in terms of delivering my plan. That's essentially what I'm tasked to do with the annual report. Where I do performance is not just in internal meetings, but in our public performance meetings. And the Chief Constable and I, and the Chief Foreign Officer and I, we go next door, we webcast 2 or 3 times a year to the public, and we take the pack almost exactly to the level of detail that the services see. I don't think anywhere else in the country does that. It's really important to me that if people have a particular issue, they can see the real information, they can see how did that compare to 2 years ago, how did it compare, most importantly, to pre-COVID, and they can see trends and make judgments. So, having said that, and by the way, all the members of this panel are very welcome to be at those public performance meetings, not to answer questions, but just to see the level of detail and appreciate how transparent we're being. But I think the colleagues in my engagement team have done a good job here in summarising a lot of information. but we don't underestimate how difficult it is. And actually, it's for the services as well. And they have a programme at the moment about more engagement with local councils, community groups, drop-in sessions, things like that, just to highlight to people where something that's concerning them is being attended to. But I think it's something we can all always do better at in communicating. And as you'll know, because you knock doors like I do, if you knock 10 doors, you're going to get 10 different questions and there's 10 different priorities. So juggling it and getting everybody's answer as they want to hear it is quite tricky. But we'll keep working at it. I do take your point, though. I'm not too interested in percentages, because I was in a parish meeting the other day where I think it was their business crime had gone up by 100%. It had gone up from 2 to 4. Okay. And then everybody relaxed once they heard it was 4 incidents. So there are times when it's meaningful, times when it isn't quite so.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Maker. Yeah, Mr. Maker. Yeah, please. Who's next?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, thank you for the report. I just wanted to clarify about the 3 firefighters and the crew. Is that just for the part-time and not the full-time? Then also a little bit about the councillor's question on the statistics. In report on page 4, you reference the fire and rescue plan and the police and crime plan. Maybe just to reference the progress reports there would have been enough to get the public to see them reports to match up with the statistics that you've put on the following page. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Maycott. To take that second one first, what we've tried to do with the document is the priorities in the plan are set out, and then what we've been achieving against each one is pretty much mirrored up in the more detailed section. And of course, those plans are available with, where it's possible to put targets, like 250 officers at bang, where it's possible to say we want to be top 10, top 20 on something, then it's there as a statement. But I think the key thing here is that what I've definitely realised is that we've got a moving target in the nature of a crime and the demand on the services. And I would actually, I think, particularly on 101, have been quite comfortable this year if we'd maintained our time of answering rather than improving it, because they've had to answer a lot more calls and they've taken longer, and we've been endeavouring to identify risk to a greater degree than ever before. So sometimes the headline stat doesn't tell the whole story, but it's nonetheless, I'll always be striving to be open and transparent with that. Just to come back to this riding in threes, this is a conversation and a pilot that we're having with the on-call. I don't really call them part-time because they say, you know, I'm not available for 60 hours a week. That can be quite a commitment. And their unions and their representatives, who are not, in all cases, the same as the whole-time firefighters union. And we're very clear that if, by exception, they ride in 3, that they will have a different scale of duties that they can undertake at the incident. So it might be more of a supportive duty than a direct tackling of an incident. But as I say, often you've got 2, 3, 4 teams sometimes, even more at wildfires, things of that nature, where every individual that can be there, every piece of equipment, every professional that can be there is an asset to tackling the incident. And it's then down to the local command to decide how they're going to use them. But the safety of the firefighters is paramount, and it's non-negotiable in those conversations. So everybody's interests are in the right place on that. Meanwhile, we do need to be encouraging more on-call firefighters And there's other things we're undertaking to try and do that as well. Because the alternative is that there won't be those second and third teams to go, or they will have to go from further away. And that is not in anybody's interests.
Thank you. Mr Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Keith Walker, independent member. Can we just go back to the points made about managing demand? And we know that there's an increase in demand on policing services, and we know that it's a very complex picture in terms of managing demand. But in local communities, perception is reality. And fairly recently, I've seen reports in my local paper and photographs where 7 or 9 police cars have attended an incident. And in one case local to me, a few weeks ago, very sadly, somebody lost his life by drowning in a canal. But on social media, there was a photograph of 12 police cars lined up on a pub car park adjacent to the canal. Now, obviously, the local community thought that there was some sort of major incident. And on occasions, I can understand that there is a large response required to attend some incidents. But again, the perception of local communities is the level of resource for that particular incident necessary? Is it managed deployment, or is there an element of self-deployment to that sort of incident? And again, the comments that were being made on social media were that, well, if I report a burglary, I'm waiting for 2 to 3 days for a patrol to attend. Or if I report antisocial behaviour, then maybe 2 or 3 hours later, a patrol may turn up when the antisocial behaviour has gone. So again, these are perceptions in local communities about what is the demand, what is the level of resources available, and are the resources being deployed appropriately for the type of incident. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr Walker, I think you might be asking me a question there that's a little too much into the operational domain. Chairman, this would be a bit unusual because the panel's here to ask me questions, but with the Chief Constable in the room, I'm wondering whether he might want to take a little bit of that after I've just dealt with the perception piece, with your permission. The perception piece, to some degree, links to what we were just talking about in terms of keeping people informed. And social media doesn't help. Never helps, actually, in my experience, unless when it's intelligence and information that's being shared, particularly around missing persons, things of that nature. Clearly, if somebody's lost their life, and I don't know, do you know it's only one person? Could there have been 3 in the canal? Who knows? Then it's all hands to the deck, and I think everybody would appreciate and expect that. The demand thing means that it isn't always the case that a grade 2 response, perhaps a burglary would get a grade 2 response if there's nobody on the scene anymore. It might have been something that occurred a few hours ago. Somebody's returned home to find they've been broken into. It may even be that the individual has said they're comfortable with an appointment at their convenience to discuss it. We can talk about prevention, making the house safer, things of that nature. And perhaps there's no intelligence to be collected on the site. So a convenient and appropriate response is a day or so later, particularly if there's other more urgent things going on. And you know this from your own experience, it's a constant balance. Sometimes there are incidents going off everywhere. Sometimes you can respond to a burglary within a minute or two because there's no greater demand at that moment and you happen to be around the corner. So there are a mixture of things. I think, however, that your point is well made, that the perception is very important. And that's why The Chief and I have co-funded some resident surveys this year to go beyond the stats and ask people how they're feeling about the service. And they were telling us at the last one that they are seeing more police, first of all, and that's something that it gives them greater confidence. It's a priority for them. Their perception is if it's visible, it's happening, particularly in public places. But also a big jump in them feeling informed so that they know the nature of the priorities. And there was that really unhelpful, I think. This is where my own view and the National Police Chief's doesn't always coincide. We had a National Police Chief statement about, hurrah, all burglaries are now receiving a visit. Well, they've been receiving a visit in Staffordshire for some years. That's normal business for us. And yet the national papers gave the impression we'd stepped up to do that because we were told to. So local perception is really important as well as national. But Chairman, how do you feel? Is it appropriate for the Chief to have a comment on particularly over-deployment? Which
I think Mr Walker's question is relevant, but it does slip into the domain of an operational issue, as you rightly say. But I think it's too good an opportunity to miss. The Chief has kindly turned up today, and I don't want to set any sort of precedent here at all, for the record. But I'd welcome the Chief's view for Mr Walker.
No, thank you, Chair, and I'm content, obviously, I'm here. So in terms of dealing with the generality of that type of incident, I suppose something which obviously will have a coroner-led investigation. I think what you will often find is at the start of an incident, especially where it involves a crime in action, loss of life, a body that's been recovered, you will find officers will have to maintain a cordon in a scene. They may well have to give first aid or potentially pronounce life extinct. They will have various roles within that incident, and then you will find the resources will be redeployed. But there's a very close observation of those resources from the Force Contact Centre, because as you say, there will be other things going on at that same point in time. But we have got core responsibilities around protection of life, securing a scene, and then clearly investigating on behalf of the coroner where there's a body. And not all apparent suicides turn out to be actual suicides. There may well be foul play, or at least we have to discount that. But I do think it's a fair challenge. I think you find resources in policing will always default to crimes in action, whether that be around violence or a burglary in action, where we have got the greatest opportunity to apprehend an offender or deal with a threat to someone's life. Where that threat has dissipated or there's no live time interaction, for want of a better phrase, then that's we would normally consider maybe a delayed response. I think the benefit of having 12 police cars is probably maybe a spin-off benefit from our local policing model. I don't think we would have had that before in many areas. So I think it is a key community concern about, well, you take this seriously, but you don't take that. But where we deal with a body or a crime in action, you will find very often a significant amount of police resourcing very quickly, and then it will be redeployed with proper oversight from the Force Contact Centre.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Chief. And it is tragic, that loss of life in particular. Helen and I were at a fire station only the other day, weren't we, when halfway through a very good chat, and woof, the whole lot went off, and the water safety team were actually part of that group that were gone out the door. It's a really dangerous time at the moment. Warmer weather, but still very cold water, very dangerous waters, and every year we used to lose 2 or 3 lives, and the police and fire response is really rapid, but it's really a dangerous thing to be anywhere near water if you don't have to be.
Thank you. Mr Bowen?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Commissioner. As is often the case with these reports, it contains a great deal of positive language with words like progress and achievement and all the rest of it. But of course, there are always 2 sides to every coin. And you've mentioned this morning your appreciation for the work that your team does. But with the wonderful benefit of hindsight, I wondered, looking back at the last 12 months, which as Commissioner, where you think you and your team perhaps could and should have done things differently or better.
Keep that brief if you wish, Commissioner.
Yeah. Yeah, I could say I can't think of any, but that isn't true, is it? Mr. Bone, you always ask the most thought-provoking questions. Look, I've got to be absolutely blunt. The service is still not where we want it to be. Not where the residents want it to be. Any of my office, or I think the Chief and most of his team would agree that they want to be an outstanding police service, and they're not that today. So I guess where there is discomfort, I'm not comfortable that we're in the engaged process with HMI. I'm very comfortable with the progress we're making to get away from that. The support actually has been welcome. The College of Policing in particular have come close to us and are actually very encouraged by some of the stuff the Chief's done to deal with our own engaged concerns, and they want to now share that with other police forces. We're not going to be the only one of half a dozen services in that process in the next 2 or 3 years, because the pressure is on all of us to improve. So my regret is that perhaps by this time next year, we won't have outstanding police and outstanding fire and rescue services. But I would expect some elements of it to be. And I would expect to see, and I'm confident we'll see, the improvement that I see every single day. I guess occasionally I'm discouraged when I meet particularly members of staff or officers that are exceptionally busy and wanting the solution today, and it doesn't always happen like that. So we've got a lot of new officers, but they're being trained, which is a good thing. And they're all terrific, by the way. So some are coming out of their 3rd year of training, some are in their 1st, which means they can't always be on their neighbourhood team duties as often as their colleagues might wish or want, or indeed they might want. So striking balances and working around some of those frustrations when you're so desperate to get the job done is quite tricky. And I'm also very... it's difficult because of where we are in the... with the economy at the moment, making plans with the uncertainty. We don't really know what pay settlements will be possible. And I think people have worked very hard and deserve a good return. So for me, those are two of the three of the things that keep me focused. But it's both services, the feel is quite different. And I know they were coming out of COVID. I know it was extremely difficult. But the main thing is that everybody's sense of what they can do to support their colleagues, what they do as leaders at whatever level in the organisation, their autonomy and their capacity and the encouragement they receive from the top to do so is very different. And every organisation I've seen that works well works on that basis. It can't be all about one person. It has to be everybody doing their very best in the areas where they excel. And just given some time, we're going to be in a really good place.
Right, thank you. Are there any more questions for the Commissioner? Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner, you make reference regarding 101 calls down by 27.7%, which I might say is very encouraging. However, is there another side to that, those figures? In a sense, the calls that actually aren't answered, that actually don't then get a response, because whilst you're saying the wait time is improving, there's an element then obviously the customer, if we would like to call our residents, has lost patience and has hung up, and therefore we're not getting a true reflection of actually the 101 service. So in a sense, the question is not necessarily getting to the figures that might be behind the missed calls, which obviously might be helpful though as a whole. It's actually what I would like to think, what is really happening in sense of building confidence to our residents that the 101 service is fit for purpose and they should have confidence to using it. And then will we not see then maybe the use and drill it down to an effective service? That's really my concern, and what confidence can we instill in our residents?
Well, I think one big leap in confidence will be when HMI see fit to sort of say we're in control of managing our future on contact. Part of their concern was around identifying risk at contact point. So I'm watching that keenly. And then when we're re-inspected, there'll be that external comment on our wider contact as well. Abandoned calls is something I watch very carefully. At the public performance meetings, we always talk about it. It is improving. Interestingly, some people will drop off for various reasons. Triage has really helped because most people get to speak to somebody quite quickly. And sometimes they will have made an appointment or they're going to progress their passing of intelligence in a different way, or it's a query that is not for the contact centre. But we've also got a live chat facility. People can type in and talk to someone online. That's proving to be popular. And we've got the report button on the website, which means you can, in your own time, basically say, I observed this at such and such a time. You know, no need to call me back. It's not urgent, etc. And sometimes people will drop off, say they're 20 minutes in, and they say, I can't wait any longer, so I'll send it via the web. And we're not particularly, it's not easy actually to see those connections. However, I am aware, because they've been brought to my attention, an average is one thing, but that doesn't mean that some people aren't still waiting a long time and feel they have to. So I've seen calls over an hour, sometimes even more at very busy times on 101. And quite frankly, Councillor Cox, that's why it's still my top priority. It's not going anywhere just yet because it drives the service, and it really does drive confidence. You can have a level of confidence if you're not engaged with police or fire, if you're fortunately not engaged. If you are, it's a very different kettle of fish, isn't it? And you need to feel I was well dealt with there. And I think there are some opportunities to do more, but we do need more staff in there to make that make those options available, even if it's callbacks and things like that after the fact. By the way, 999 calls, if somebody abandons a 999, the service actually go to considerable lengths to call them back, because it might well be there's an emergency and they've been interrupted or something even worse. And you might have read about the 999 failure nationally last weekend. It didn't affect Staffordshire too badly, but it was a real problem in some parts of the country, getting back to all the 999 calls that were interrupted to check that that wasn't a person in real distress. So we'll keep an eye on that, and through the public performance, you can do so too, and just keep me honest on it.
Councillor Maycock.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, just a little bit on knife crime. I don't want to get too operational on this, but there's been a good few incidents in Tamworth around knife crime. And it's good to see that the Knife Angels currently in Lichfield. We had an amnesty in Tamworth a couple of weeks ago. Just what else are you doing to look at that situation, and with the curve sadly going up?
Yeah, the curve is going up, not very much here, thank goodness, and from low levels, but it's a major concern for us. We've got what's called a violence reduction alliance here, which we set up voluntarily, police and other partners, particularly councils and probation, to really try and understand the underlying causes. It's not always crime, well, it's not always drug-related crime, it's not always young people, it's quite often sharps and knives within relationship situations, unfortunately, far more often than you believe. One or two of the incidents in Tamworth recently were between people who were known to each other for one reason, so there's no wider public concern. But every single incident is a worry for the public. We had a violence reduction conference last week where this was key. We've invested in some terrific virtual reality type equipment where it allows young people in particular to sit down, go through scenarios involving gangs, involving knife pressure to carry, which is the big deal. If you aren't carrying, you're very, very unlikely to be involved in any sort of knife-related incident. And that's the value to me of the Knife Angel. We saw it up in Stoke-on-Trent last year, and now in Lichfield, where it's not just about the actual sculpture and the messages on those knives and all the rest of it. And anybody who hasn't seen it, go and see it. It really is something. But it's about that work in schools and further afield to raise the awareness, particularly of younger people, about the risks of carrying a knife. I guess coming back to the question from Mr. Bowen earlier, that's the thing I can't get used to in the job because I'm not professional. Just the stuff that happens. The stuff that happens. And there was an incident with a young man in Burton that really makes knife crime very difficult. I was very pleased, actually. We've got bleed kits into all the police response vehicles this year. That's thanks to the chief working alongside us to do that. We just need to be able to help people in any situation.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just come back a little bit on that one, please.
Say again.
Just come back a little bit on that
okay,
one, please.
Yeah.
Just a little follow-on from that, about one of the incidents. Again, it's not operational, it's more about comms that could be put out to prevent fear, but also stop anything else happening, because some of the comments that were flown around on social media that it may have been one of our guests in the Holiday Inn. And I think maybe a faster response from the police, not saying who it was, but that it wasn't what people were saying it was, would have been better.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, Dan, I'd forgotten, but not long ago you were in an incident yourself, weren't you? Which was quite scary. Just on the issue with migrants that we've got housed in Staffordshire, and we are doing more than many other places in that respect, actually, right across Tamworth, Cannock, more to come in Stafford and in Stoke-on-Trent. The worries for the service are particularly around organisations that are trying to make more of that than is the reality. The risk is around particularly right-wing groups and others looking to set up protests and use Staffordshire as a bit of a testing ground. And social media isn't helping. People have genuine concerns and they need informed, genuine information. The genuine information is the criminality is exceptionally low and the risk is exceptionally low. And a lot of what they read is, quite frankly, nonsense. But I do take your point. There was a press release, actually, about that recent incident in Tamworth, and I'm working with your new leader and deputy to try and get press releases in particular more quickly and more widely spread around Tamworth, but further afield as well. I think a lot of what the services do in terms of quick responses to incidents and where they've made an arrest or they've charged somebody and there's some background information they can share, we need to get in the public domain quicker because it is reassuring, if only to myth bust, which is often what's the case on social media. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for the Commissioner? Right, thank you. Before we go on to item 9 on the agenda, during your answers, Commissioner, I picked up particularly on the use of the word community. And that's the thread that this committee is focused on. Community support and community safety. And we're really, really pleased to hear that today, and we'll be keeping our eye on it as you would expect, and hope that you'll be able to sustain the effort that's obviously going in at the moment. So thank you for that. Item 9 on the agenda is the Home Office grant. I think we note that unless anyone has any comments. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is the management and complaints against the Commissioner and or his deputy. None to discuss. Item 11 on the agenda, questions on the report. I think we've had a fair whack at that this morning, unless there are any more. Thank you. Dates for future meetings and the work programme. The next meeting is scheduled for September the 25th. And item 13 on the agenda is exclusion of the public. Do I have to read that too?
No, there were no items.
No items. No items to discuss under that heading. Commissioner.
Chairman, just on your work programme, my office has approached Mandy and others to say that, particularly with the new membership, you might want to visit the services, you might want to visit my office to see what we're doing, see what the Commissioner's team is doing, and get a feel for the two services in terms of delivery. You are very, very welcome to do that, and we'll facilitate it in any way we can. There's only so much you can pick up from documents, and we'll make sure you get to meet as many people as possible.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask Mandy to have a look at that, and very grateful for that offer, Commissioner. Thank you. Right, thank you. Councillor Cox.
I just for the visibility and transparency, that perhaps the training sessions are dated on our work programme, to know that we are obviously having that training. It just makes it a little bit more transparent. I don't know if that's possible.
It's a good point, thank you. Okay. Right, if there are no... Sorry, Mr. Byrne.
This is not a thought-provoking comment, but just to say thank you very much for that offer. I think particularly if councillors have not been aware of how the Commissioner's office works and what goes on there, that could be a very useful session if that could be arranged. Thank you.
Right. Okay then. Well, at that point, I'll extend thanks to everyone who attended, the Commissioner and his team. It was nice to see the Chief Constable. And at that point, I'll close the meeting and thank you.